Welcome, especially if you're listening to us for the very first time. Today, refuge at Adullam, but disaster at Nob. The book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 38, describes well how God's people lived at times of their greatest persecutions. It reads, "They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves of the earth." When David had to escape for his life from King Saul, who was trying to kill him, that was his experience, going from place to place, at times in the mountains or in the forests or in the deserts, at times having to find a place of refuge in a cave and to live there. But David found hope in God and strength in God, although these were difficult times for him, extremely difficult times for him and for all of God's people who waited for the establishment of David's rule as the king whom God had chosen. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I present these talks looking at the King James Bible, verse by verse and word by word, each time looking at a different chapter, and today's chapter is the first book of Samuel, that's 1 Samuel, chapter 22. And here David begins his wanderings into different places as Saul tries to hunt him down and kill him. And all the places David went to seemed to be within about 20 miles, 30 kilometers from David's hometown of Bethlehem, a small region, but David is going across, back and forward, the land assigned to the tribe of Judah, his own tribe. So turning now to the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 22, let's begin reading at the beginning of these wanderings across Judah with verse 1. David therefore departed thence. Thence means from there. If you read the previous chapter, you'll see he was at Gath in Philistia, the land of the Philistines. David therefore departed thence, and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. So David's place of refuge was initially a cave, close to the town called Adullam. Across Israel, there is a lot of limestone which naturally forms caves. Often very large chambers have tiny little entrances which are not obvious. These were the sort of places where robbers lived. David will have to live like an outcast. He has to live like a prisoner in this cave. But he doesn't remain there alone, because his brethren, in other words his brothers, and all his father's house, all his relatives, heard that David was there. And when they heard that David was there, they went down and they too lived in this cave with him. Adullam is on the west side of Judah, not very far from the border of Philistia. All of Judah at this time was borderlands. It was a country, part of Israel, and yet not really under the control of Israel's army. Only a small population of tough people who were willing to suffer and to work in the most hostile environment stayed there, because there were the robbers from Amalek still living to the south of Judah, who frequently would enter Judah and rob the farms and destroy the towns. And there were also, of course, the Philistines, a strong enemy for King Saul, who entered the country at frequent intervals. And in fact, not long after David's brothers left Bethlehem, they saw an opportunity to take Bethlehem for themselves. You can read about that in 2 Samuel chapter 23, beginning at verse 13, when you'll find that there was a Philistine garrison in Bethlehem at this very time when David was in the cave Adullam. The Philistines had gone in, they'd taken control of Bethlehem, they were demanding taxes from all the people who lived round there. Saul's kingdom, you see, was very weak. Verse 2, and everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him. So the people who had troubles in Israel, the people who had debts they couldn't pay, who couldn't cope with the situation under Saul's government, who were being taken advantage of by other people, they left their homes, and whereas previously they might have become robbers, or joined the bands of robbers that were living round about, or they might have gone into a foreign country, as David's family had themselves gone long ago in the book of Ruth, and almost forgotten about Israel. But when they saw David, whom everyone in Israel wanted to be king, living there in the cave Adullam, they went there, they joined with him, they decided that they would support him and form a little army under his control, because we read at the end of verse 2, and he became a captain over them, a leader of them to direct them in their fights, in their battles, and there were with him about 400 men. You may ask what these 400 men were doing, how they were earning a living while they were living out there in this remote place with David in this cave. And the explanation seems to be, when we read the following chapters, that David and his brothers organised these men as guards to guard the farms around Judah, these farms which Saul was doing such a poor job of protecting from robbers. David was now organising people properly, and the farmers were paying David's men to do this work and to guard the farms. David saw that this was no place for his elderly parents to remain. So we read in verse 3, and David went thence to Mizpeh of Moab, on the east side of the Dead Sea, the place where David's family had been long before, and from which Ruth, David's ancestor, came. And David said, continuing verse 3, unto the king of Moab, let my father and mother, I pray thee, in other words, please, come forth and be with you, till I know what God will do for me. And notice that last clause. David isn't imagining that his situation is hopeless, that he's going to be running away forever. He knows God's promise. God's promise that one day he will rule Israel, and he's waiting for God to do it. I need to wait, he says, until I know what God will do for me. Verse 4, and he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in the hold. The hold here seems to mean while David is living in the cave at Adullam. We still use in English the word stronghold to mean a safe place. In the Hebrew language, the same word that is hold here can mean a net that you use for catching birds. And so this was as well as being a place of safety, a difficult place to be. You can read the Psalms David wrote while he was living in that cave. Psalm 57, Psalm 142, desperate pleas to God. Or you can read the passage we've just been talking about with Bethlehem, 2 Samuel 23, beginning at verse 13, when David was desperate just to taste again the pure, clear water that came from the well at Bethlehem. But he couldn't have it because he was in the hold. Verse 5, and the prophet Gad, he's called David's seer in the second book of Samuel, chapter 24, verse 11. He was an important prophet in Israel during the rule of King David. He said to David, continuing with verse 5, abide not in the hold, don't remain where you are. Depart and get thee into the land of Judah. Then David departed and came into the forest of Haret. So David is told, don't remain in the cave at Adullam. It's a safe place, it's a secure place, it's not where God wants you to be. Because the prophet spoke these words, and because the emphasis is on him being a prophet, we know that this is God's word to David and not just sensible advice from Gad. Gad tells him, go into the land of Judah. Now, Adullam was already in Judah, but he's told to leave Adullam and go elsewhere into the land, the region that belongs to the tribe of Judah. So David obeys. Then David departed and came into the forest of Haret, a forest that we don't know about, but in these early days, much of Israel was forested. And amongst the trees, there were wild animals. We've referred previously to the lions and the bears and the wolves that lived in the forests and occasionally killed people in Israel. But this place, this wild place, this difficult place to live in, was the place where David chose to move to next. So we're now going to switch from what happened to David to what's happening with Saul. And what happens next is one of the most terrible incidents in the entire Bible. I warn you of that before we encounter it. It comes as a shock to us. Verse 6, when Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men that were with him. So Saul hears not only where David is, but also that he's got a little army supporting him of 400 men, and Saul considers that a threat. Verse 6, the end of the verse, the words in brackets, tell us a bit about what's happening now. This is Saul's parliament. He's gathered together the important people in his government, and because his palace is only a little house, there's not room for them to meet in the palace. So Saul gathers them together outside in Gibeah, his hometown. Let's read the words. Now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. So Saul takes his position there in his hometown Gibeah, under a prominent tree, a well-known meeting place. He is holding his spear as indicative of his authority as Israel's king, and all his servants. He's gathered all the men in his government. They're standing around to listen to Saul's speech. Verse 7, then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, hear now, ye Benjamites, members of the tribe of Benjamin, Israel's smallest tribe, but the tribe from which Saul himself came. And the fact that Saul can call them ye Benjamites, shows that the men that Saul appointed to his government were his own relatives and members of his own tribe. And now he gives a speech. He gives a speech which is fierce, like all Saul's speeches are, and emotive and powerful and childish too. These characteristics we've seen from Saul, with Saul from the beginning. He says, will the son of Jesse, that's David was the son of Jesse, but Saul doesn't speak his name, he only refers to his father's name. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? Do you really trust the son of Jesse, David from the tribe of Judah, to benefit you who are from the tribe of Benjamin? Has he arranged maybe and promised to give you all bribes, that you're going to get fields and vineyards, places to grow grapes, gardens? Fields didn't have a wall around them, vineyards did, because fields were in the open countryside and vineyards were often in the towns and needed to be protected from animals entering in which would steal the grapes. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? Has he promised, David, to make you leaders in his army, that you are going to direct thousands of people, or maybe hundreds of people? At the same time, Saul is hinting. He's saying, look at the wealth I've brought to you. I've brought to you that you've got fields and vineyards. I've brought to you the position where you are leaders in the army, people from my own tribe, Benjamin. But David, no, he's from the tribe of Jesse, the tribe of Judah. He's from the family of Jesse. He's not quite a foreigner because you all belong to Israel, but he doesn't care about you. Yet you're acting as if he does. You're acting as if you want David to be king. Saul continues, verse 8, that all of you have conspired against me. Conspired means to join together as enemies against Saul the king. And there is none that sheweth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse. None of you have warned me that my son Jonathan has made a league, a covenant, an agreement with the son of Jesse, that's David. My own son is rebelling against me, and none of you have warned me. And there is none of you that is sorry for me, or sheweth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant, he means David, against me. None of you care about me. None of you have any sympathy for me. You haven't told me about these troubles. You haven't shown me that Jonathan has stirred up David against me, the end of the verse, to lie in wait, as at this day. To lie in wait is what a robber does when he waits for someone to come who he's going to attack. If David were lying in wait for Saul, he would be waiting for his moment and preparing for the moment when he could attack and kill King Saul. It wasn't true. It wasn't true at all. David still respected and loved Saul. David would do anything to protect Saul. It was Saul who wanted to kill David and had reversed the reality of it. Verse 9, then answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul. This man Doeg, we've read about him before in chapter 21, verse 7. He's there described as the chiefest of Saul's herdmen. the men who looked after Saul's farm animals. And now we read that he, an Edomite, a foreigner, was over the servants of Saul. He was the most important of Saul's officials. And this powerful foreigner said, the end of verse 9, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. He did indeed. In verse 21, chapter 21, he saw when David went to Nob, the city or the town of the chief priests. And what is more, he went to Ahimelech, the chief priest himself. And, verse 10, he inquired of the Lord for him. That doesn't appear in the previous chapter, yet Ahimelech does not deny it when it's questioned later on of him. So it seems clear as a matter of fact that the chief priest did inquire of God for directions for David when David came to him. He inquired of the Lord for him and gave him victuals, that is, he gave him food, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. So everything Doeg says is true. He's only spoken the perfect truth. Funny to contrast that with David in the previous chapter, who was giving false impressions and trying by deceit to protect himself and to protect other people. Doeg speaks the truth, but he speaks the truth and uses it like a weapon to kill his enemies. We'll see that soon. Verse 11, then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, that is, King Saul has sent for the chief priest and all his father's house. So the whole family of the chief priest is to come with Ahimelech to see Saul at Gibeah. The priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. So Ahimelech's been arrested, and all the priests that live with him in Nob, the town of the chief priests, have come with him, ordered to appear before King Saul. And now the court case, verse 12. And Saul said, hear now, thou son of Ahitub. You notice he won't call him by his own name either. And he answered, that is, Ahimelech answered, here I am, my lord. Behold me, I'm here. And he calls Saul my lord, showing great respect for him. But Saul is angry. Saul accuses, with almost identical words that he used to accuse his servants earlier, he now accuses Ahimelech, the chief priest of Israel, God's chief priest. Why have ye conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse? In other words, he's saying that Ahimelech is part of this plan with David to kill Saul, an imagined plan. How has Ahimelech conspired? Saul says, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me, to lie in wait, as at this day. David is trying to kill me, says Saul, and you are his supporter, his accomplice, the person with him who has given him the weapons and the food that he needs, and even direction from God as to what he's to do. And so David is preparing to kill me. Verse 14, Ahimelech, the chief priest, he didn't know when David came that there was any trouble between David and Saul. He did not know until this moment that there is this great trouble, and yet he's going to answer faithfully. He sees his life is in danger, but Ahimelech is not going to die with deceit in his mouth with words of deceit. No, Ahimelech is going to testify to the truth, even if it costs him his life, and it did. Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, "And who is so faithful," in other words, loyal, "who is so faithful among all thy servants as David?" You think you've got reliable servants, reliable men in your government like Doeg the Edomite. He's not faithful at all. Your most faithful servant, the servant you should trust, is David. And notice Ahimelech doesn't call him the son of Jesse. He calls him David, which means beloved. He's drawing attention to how attractive David is as a person. David, he says, is the king's son-in-law. He's a member of your own family. He goeth at thy bidding. That means Saul's bidding is when Saul asks someone to do something, and if David goes at Saul's bidding, David obeys Saul's instructions. But that phrase, goeth at thy bidding, is also a way of describing a member of Saul's government. David is faithful. He's your son-in-law. He's married your daughter. He's the most important member of your government. He's honourable in thine house. He receives honour in the royal palace of King Saul. He is not someone who is in rebellion against Saul, as Saul has described. He is the most reliable and trustworthy of people. Ahimelech, the chief priest, continues in verse 15. Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. In other words, of course not. I've often inquired of God on behalf of David, and when I do so, I am loyally serving you, King Saul, because David is such a loyal and reliable member of your household and your government. So, end of verse 15, let not the king impute anything to his servant. Let him not put or imagine or charge anything against me. It's not true. Nor to all the house of my father. None of my family are conspiring against you. None of us is doing anything to oppose your government. And then Ahimelech, the chief priest, concludes, thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more, not the smallest thing, not the greatest thing of what trouble is going on. I knew none of it. And so you shouldn't accuse me. You shouldn't accuse me of doing evil against your government. I am loyal to your government. King Saul listens to all this and cares nothing for it. Verse 16, and the king said, thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech. Surely die. The Hebrew word for saying that is to repeat the word die. Thou shalt die, die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. The punishment is not just against the one man, it's against all the priests, because the priests have joined together with David against the king. What a terrible judgment against anyone, even more so when it is against the family of the chief priests, those who stand with special responsibilities to God for Israel. And such a terrible command that Saul's guards refused to obey it. Verse 17. And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, the guards, turn and slay the priests of the Lord, because their hand is also with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not show it to me. But the servants of the king, in other words his guards, would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. to fall upon. That verb to fall really means to meet in the Hebrew, but it's clearly intention because Saul's given the instruction that they're to die. But the servants won't even touch the priests. They don't want to harm them in any way. They refuse to carry out King Saul's commands, even though the punishment for not obeying the king's commands might be very terrible for them. But the king doesn't care about his footmen, his guards who refuse to obey his order, because he's got Doeg. And Doeg does not care about God's chief priests. He does not care about God. He's a foreigner, an Edomite. He serves false gods. Verse 18, and the king said to Doeg, turn thou, and fall upon the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priests, and slew on that day 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. A score is 20, so 80 is 80. So 85 priests were killed by Doeg that day on the order of King Saul. They're described as persons that did wear a linen ephod. An ephod is the robe of a priest. We must contrast this with the high priest's ephod, which is mentioned in chapter 23, verse 6, the special ornamented ephod, which the high priest used to inquire of God. These are linen ephods. Linen is a cloth, a simple cloth. These men were distinguished by the simple clothes that they wore, and they were clearly priests. And Doeg didn't finish by executing the king's command. What he did was worse than that, because, verse 19, and Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxen and asses and sheep, with the edge of the sword. He killed everyone in Nob, whether they were men or women or children. He even killed all the animals. He wouldn't even take the animals for himself. He had to kill everything. He had to destroy everything. And so the priests of Israel were destroyed, except for one man. Verse 20. And one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped. When he saw all his relatives being killed, his father being killed, his uncles being killed, he ran. He ran, and he ran for David. He first made sure to get the ephod, the high priest's garment, and to rescue it. We're going to find that out in chapter 23, verse 6. He had to rescue it before he went and searched for David, because he saw that as the sole survivor of his family, it fell to him now to be the chief priest of Israel. A weighty and very emotional incident. So it is that verse 21, Abiathar finds David, and he reports to him what's happened. And Abiathar shewed David that Saul had slain the Lord's priests. In other words, he told him about it. He told him how all his family had died, that he alone lived, and that now he must serve as Israel's chief priest. Verse 22. David is in trouble. He knows he used deceit to get the support of the priests. He knows that he acted as he shouldn't, and yet David is going to be statesmanlike. He's not going to take this incident and live simply under the blame of it. No, he's going to deal with it. He's going to take responsibility and sort out what remains of this situation, terrible as it is. Verse 22, and David said unto Abiathar, I knew it that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house. He takes responsibility. He accepts the blame, and now he deals with it. Verse 23, abide thou with me. Stay here. Stay alongside me. I'm going to support you. Fear not. I'm going to defend you. For he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life. Saul will only be able to kill you if he kills me first. And God has promised to me, to David, that I will be Israel's king, and therefore I will defend you. End of verse 23. But with me thou shalt be in safeguard. I will find a place of safety for you. Even though there is no place of safety for me, nevertheless, you will be safe. I will protect you. I will look after you. In a moment, I'm going to read to you the whole of this very emotional chapter, the first book of Samuel, chapter 22. First, though, let me give you my email address. It's 333kjv@gmail.com. That's 333kjv@gmail.com. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I'd love to know where you are, and if you're in America, which of the states. 333kjv@gmail.com. And now the whole of the first book of Samuel, chapter 22, in the King James Version of the Bible. David therefore departed thence, and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And every one that was in distress, and every one that was in debt, and every one that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him. And he became a captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men. And David went thence to Mizpah of Moab, and he said unto the king of Moab, Let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you, till I know what God will do for me. And he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in the hold. And the prophet Gad said unto David, Abide not in the hold, depart and get thee into the land of Judah. Then David departed and came into the forest of Haret. When Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men that were with him. Now Saul abode in Gibeah under a tree in Ramah, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Then Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, that all of you have conspired against me? And there is none that sheweth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you that is sorry for me, or sheweth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as at this day. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, which was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. And Saul said, Hear now, ye son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, Why have ye conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honourable in thine house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. And the king said, Thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, Turn and slay the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled, and did not shew it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, Turn now, and fall upon the priests. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priests, and slew on that day 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxen and asses and sheep, with the edge of the sword. And one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar shewed David that Saul had slain the Lord's priests. And David said unto Abiathar, I knew it that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house. Abide thou with me, fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life. But with me thou shalt be in safeguard.